The year is 1987. The air in the office is thick with the smell of dust and grain. And something else. Desperation. Frank Gable sits behind his father's oak desk, the same desk he's sat behind for 40 years. He is the owner of Gable Regional Mill, a good man, a fair man. He serves on the church board, coached Little League for a decade. Everyone in the county knows Frank Gable is an honest man. Right now, that doesn't matter. Across from him sits a young man in a clean shirt. He drove down from the city, 200 miles. He represents a new kind of business, a microbrewery. The young man is polite. He is also firm. He slides a piece of paper across the desk. It's a contract, a big one. Big enough to keep the mill running for another year. Big enough to stop the letters from the bank. Frank picks it up. His hands feel heavy. He reads the terms. The volume is good. The price is fair. Then he gets to the specification clause. Section C, subsection 4, grain source. The brewery requires all malted barley to be sourced exclusively from a single origin, a specific one. The contract names the variety. Miller's Gold. Frank has never heard of it. He looks at the young man. This is a local variety? The young man nods. Yes, sir, very local. We believe it's grown only by the originator. Frank feels a flicker of hope. A local farmer. He knows them all. He can make this work. He asks for the farmer's name. The young man checks his notes. A Mr. Thomas Miller. Frank Gable puts the contract down on the desk. The room goes silent. The hum of the machinery outside seems to fade away. He looks at the name again. Thomas Miller. He remembers a boy, a quiet boy with worried eyes, standing in this very office, a lifetime ago. He remembers a truck full of ruined barley. He remembers the words he said to that boy. Kind words, sensible words, protective words. He told the boy his grain wasn't fit for feed. He told him to cut his losses, to plow it under, to move on. And now, 25 years later, a man from the city has driven 200 miles, not just to buy that same grain, but to demand it, as the one condition for saving Frank Gable's business. Frank felt something he couldn't quite name. It was the sound of a world he thought he understood, quietly turning upside down. This channel tells the stories of people who were told no, people who heard the sensible advice and chose the harder path, the stories of quiet rebellion, of decades spent proving a simple point. If you believe in these stories, if you believe that the work of our hands matters, subscribe to this channel, because we have so many more to tell you, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Let me tell you about the next 25 years. But first, we have to go back. Back to 1962, to a farm with 160 acres of good bottomland, and a sky the color of a bruise. Thomas Miller stood in his yard. He was 21 years old. The farm was his. A year ago, his father had passed. A quiet man, taken by a weak heart, leaving Thomas with the land, the debt, and his grandfather, Elias. Elias lived in the small house by the creek. He was 80 years old. His hands were knots of leather. His eyes had seen 70 harvests. That summer, Thomas had worked harder than ever before. He planted the barley his grandfather had saved for decades, a special variety. Elias called it Miller's Gold. It wasn't a modern, high-yield hybrid. It was smaller, tougher. It grew deep roots. Elias said it remembered the droughts of the 30s. The grain had a rich, nutty smell when you rolled it in your hands. The crop came in beautifully. The heads were full. The stalks were strong. It was going to be the best year of his young life, enough to pay down the note at the bank, enough to buy a new clutch for the tractor, enough to finally breathe. Then came the storm. In late August, a storm that wasn't in the forecast. It came from the northwest, fast and green and angry. Hailstones the size of marbles, then the size of acorns. It lasted 12 minutes. 12 minutes was all it took. Thomas walked the fields the next morning. The ground was white with ice. The barley stalks were shredded. The heads were battered. What grain was left was undersized, discolored, bruised. He spent a week harvesting what he could. The yield was less than half of what he'd hoped. The quality looked terrible, but it was all he had. He loaded his father's 1954 Ford F600. He drove the 12 miles into town, to the Gable Regional Mill, the only place to sell your grain for 100 miles. Frank Gable had taken over the mill from his father, just like Thomas had taken over the farm from his. Frank was a good man. He was known for giving fair grades and honest weights. He greeted Thomas with a warm handshake, asked about his grandfather. Then he walked over to the truck. He climbed up the side. He ran his hands through the barley. He let the kernels fall through his fingers. He was quiet for a long time. The silence stretched out. Thomas felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Frank climbed down. He brushed the dust from his hands. He looked at Thomas. Not with contempt, not with pity, something softer, and in some ways worse. It was certainty. He put a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Son," he said, "I know you had that hailstorm out your way. It was a bad one." Thomas just nodded. Frank continued. "I've been doing this for 15 years, Tom. I've seen 1,000 crops damaged like this. There's just not enough meat on these kernels. The test weight is going to be too low. It's full of moisture. It'll spoil in the silo." Thomas found his voice. "It's a special variety, Frank. It's stronger than it looks." Frank gave him a sad, paternal smile. "I know it is, son. Every farmer's crop is special to him, but the market doesn't care about that. The market cares about numbers, and the numbers on this grain are no good. So what can you give me for it?" Frank sighed. He looked away for a moment, toward the big silos gleaming in the sun. "Tom, I can't sell this as milling grain. I can't even really sell it for brewer's malt. The germination rate will be a disaster. The best I can do," he paused, "the best I can do is grade it as feed grain, and even then it's low quality. I'd have to blend it off with better stuff. I can offer you 40 cents a bushel." Thomas felt the air leave his lungs. 40 cents. The market rate for good barley was $1.25. He had 200 bushels in the truck, $80. For a whole summer's work. It wouldn't even cover the cost of the fuel to get here. "I can't, Frank. I just can't." The older man's expression was one of genuine concern. "Son, listen to me. I'm not trying to cheat you. I'm trying to help you. Take the $80. Go home. Plow the rest of that field under. Cut your losses. You're a young man. You'll have other crops, better crops. I'm not going to be the man who encourages you to throw good money after bad. This grain isn't worth it. It's not even fit for animal feed, really. I'm just offering because I knew your father. He was a good man, a practical man. He would tell you the same thing." Every word Frank said was reasonable. Every word was logical. Every word was spoken with kindness. And every word felt like a stone wall being built around him. Thomas looked at the man who held his future in his hands. A good man, a pillar of the community, a man who was absolutely certain he was right. Thomas shook his head. "No. Thank you for your time, Frank." He got back in his truck. He started the engine, and he drove away, leaving $80 on the table, driving toward a future that had no map. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, but by a friend, by someone who thought they were protecting you. by someone who was just being practical. It's a different kind of wound. It doesn't make you angry. It makes you quiet. It makes you doubt yourself. Tell me about a time someone's certainty tried to build the box around you. Drop a comment below. Because what Thomas Miller did next, it wasn't loud, it wasn't fast, but it changed everything. He drove home in silence. The truck felt heavy and empty at the same time. He pulled into the farmyard. He shut off the engine. He just sat there for a long time, listening to the ticking of the cooling metal. His grandfather came out of the small house. Elias moved slowly, but his eyes missed nothing. He saw the full truck. He saw the look on his grandson's face. He didn't ask what happened. He already knew. He just said, "Get a bucket. Let's have a look." Thomas scooped a wooden bucket full of the bruised barley. He followed his grandfather into the little house. The house smelled of wood smoke and old books. Elias cleared the small kitchen table. He poured the grain out. It made a soft, rattling sound. He didn't say anything. He just looked. He ran his gnarled fingers through the pile. He picked up a single kernel. It was small, wrinkled from the hail. He rolled it between his thumb and forefinger. He brought it to his nose. He closed his eyes and inhaled. A long, slow breath. Then he did something strange. He put the single kernel in his mouth. He chewed it, slowly, thoughtfully, like a wine connoisseur tasting a rare vintage. Thomas watched him, holding his breath, waiting for a verdict. Finally, Elias swallowed. He looked at Thomas. His eyes were clear. "They judge the skin," he said. His voice was quiet, raspy, but steady as a rock. "They don't know the heart." He picked up another kernel, held it up to the light from the window. "This here? This is 40 years of work. Your great-grandfather brought the first seeds from the old country. We saved the best plants every year, the ones that survived the drought, the ones that survived the blight, the ones that had the deepest roots. This grain knows how to survive. It has a story inside it. The millman, he doesn't see that. He sees a number on a scale, a column in a ledger. He's not a bad man. He's just a certain man. And certainty is a kind of blindness." Thomas finally spoke. "He offered me 40 cents a bushel, grandfather, for feed." Elias nodded. He pushed the grain on the table back into a neat pile. "They took everything from us in the 30s. The bank took the North 80. The drought took the cattle. They took everything except the dirt and the seeds." He looked his grandson square in the eye. "The dirt is enough. The seeds are enough. You are enough." That was all he said. He didn't offer a plan. He didn't offer a solution. He offered something more important. Belief. Quiet. Absolute. Unshakable. Thomas looked at the old man, and then at the pile of grain on the table. And for the first time since the storm, he didn't see a ruined crop. He saw a story. He saw a promise. He saw a seed. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat at that same kitchen table, with his father's old agricultural textbooks and his grandfather's memory. He wasn't a grain farmer anymore. He had to become something else. He learned about malting, the ancient art of tricking grain into thinking it's time to grow, and then stopping it at the perfect moment. He read about it in books from the university library, old books from the 1920s. before the big industrial malting companies took over, when every town had a malt house, when malting was a craft. He learned the 3 steps: steeping, germination, kilning. It sounded simple. It was not. He started in the old dairy barn. The concrete floor was cracked. The roof leaked. He spent the fall patching the roof. He spent the winter pouring a new, smooth concrete floor in one corner, by hand, 1 bag of cement at a time. He built his first steep tank out of a salvaged livestock trough. He ran a pipe from the well. The water was cold and clean. He poured in his first batch of barley, 100 pounds of it. He soaked it, drained it, soaked it again, for 2 days, until the tiny white rootlet, the chit, began to emerge. Then came the hard part: germination. He spread the damp grain across his new concrete floor, a bed of barley 6 inches deep. The book said it needed to be kept at a constant temperature, around 60 degrees Fahrenheit. It needed to be turned, to keep the roots from matting together, to release the heat the growing seeds generated. He turned it with a shovel at first. It was back-breaking work, twice a day. He could feel the life in the pile, the warmth of thousands of seeds waking up. After 4 days, the barn was filled with a sweet, grassy smell, the smell of fresh-cut cucumbers, the smell of life. He had created green malt, but he couldn't stop there. The growth had to be halted. The malt had to be dried, kilned. This was the most dangerous part. It was where flavor was created, or destroyed. He had no kiln. He built one, from salvaged fire bricks and an old oil drum. He built a wire screen to hold the grain. He built a small firebox underneath. He learned to control the temperature by adjusting the airflow with a sheet of tin. His first batch he scorched. It smelled like burnt coffee. Useless. His second batch he didn't dry enough. It molded within a week. Useless. He was burning through his savings. The $80 he didn't take from Frank Gable was long gone. He was using the barley he had left, the grain that wasn't fit for feed. The neighbors saw the smoke coming from his barn at all hours. They started to talk. At the diner, at the church social. Heard Tom Miller's gone strange, trying to cook his own grain. A shame. His father was such a practical man. That's what happens when a boy has no guidance. Frank Gable was right to turn him away. He was trying to save the boy from himself. Thomas heard the whispers. He ignored them. He kept working. He kept reading. He kept failing. And then, 1 batch in late winter. It worked. He kept the temperature low for the first day, gently drying the malt. Then he raised it, slowly, carefully, to 150 degrees, to 180 degrees, to 200 degrees. He held it there for 4 hours. When he was done, he pulled the malt from the kiln. It was dry, crisp. It had a beautiful, light biscuit color. He put a kernel in his mouth. It was sweet, with a rich, nutty flavor he'd never tasted in any other malt. It was the flavor of his grandfather's stories, the flavor of the dirt, the flavor of survival. He had done it. He had taken the grain nobody wanted, and he had transformed it. He had found the heart inside the ugly skin. Now, he just had to find someone who cared. He bagged the first 50 pounds of his malt. He put it in the old Ford truck, and he started driving. He went to the feed stores first. They laughed at him. He went to the local baker. She was polite, but she had no use for it. He found a homebrew supply shop in a town 50 miles east, a small, cluttered store run by a man named Henderson. Henderson looked at the hand-stitched bag. He looked at Thomas's dusty clothes. He was skeptical. "What is this?" Thomas explained. "A malt I made myself, from an heirloom barley." Henderson grunted. He opened the bag. He sniffed. His eyebrows went up. Just a little. "That's an interesting nose," he said. He chewed on a kernel. He looked at Thomas again. "I don't know, kid. My customers, they like the German stuff, the English stuff, consistent, reliable." Thomas didn't argue. He just said, "Leave it here, on consignment. If it sells, you pay me. If it doesn't, I'll come pick it up next month." Henderson thought about it. He finally shrugged. "Fine, but don't get your hopes up." Thomas drove the 50 miles home. He waited. A week went by, then 2. He was about to give up, to go and collect his bag of failure. Then an envelope arrived in the mail, from Henderson's homebrew supply. Inside was a check for $42.50 and a handwritten note. "Send more." It was the most beautiful sentence Thomas had ever read. And so it began. Let me tell you about the next 25 years, because this is where the story becomes bigger than one man, bigger than one farm. It becomes the story of a quiet revolution. 1963. Thomas Miller sold 500 pounds of Miller's Gold malt, all of it through Henderson's shop, all of it paid in cash. 1964. He sold 2,000 pounds. He converted more of the barn into a malting floor. He built a second, larger kiln. Cash. 1966. He sold 10,000 pounds. Homebrewers were writing about his malt in their newsletters. They said it had a character you couldn't find anywhere else, a taste of the place it came from. 1969. He bought a used grain cleaner, a 1948 Clipper. He rebuilt the motor himself, paid for it with cash. 1972. The farm was profitable. The note at the bank was paid off. He expanded his barley planting to 50 acres. He hired a high school kid to help him turn the malt. 1975. He got a phone call from a man in the city. The man was starting one of the first new breweries in the state, a microbrewery, he called it. He had tasted a beer made with Miller's Gold. He wanted to buy 500 pounds, directly from the source. Thomas delivered it himself. The brewer met him at the loading dock. He was young, excited. He opened a bag of the malt and breathed it in. "This," he said, "this is what I've been looking for. This has a soul." That year, Frank Gable drove past the Miller farm. It was a habit he had, checking on the crops in the county. He saw the new grain bin next to the barn, a small one, but new. He saw the smoke rising from the kiln's chimney, steady, confident. He heard talk at the co-op, that Tom Miller wasn't selling his grain, that he was doing something strange with it, something with those city brewers. Frank felt a flicker of something, not annoyance, not regret, just confusion. The world was supposed to work a certain way. Good grain got a good price. Bad grain got a bad price. You couldn't make something from nothing. He had told the boy the truth. He had been kind. He had been right, hadn't he? 1978. Thomas bought the 80 acres to the north, the same 80 acres the bank had taken from his grandfather in the Depression. He paid for it in cash. 1981. He built a new, dedicated malt house, concrete block and steel beams, with a proper ventilated kiln. He installed a mechanical turner. He could now produce 10,000 pounds a week. Cash. 1985. Miller's Gold malt was being shipped to small breweries in 5 different states. It was winning awards. Not Thomas. The malt. The beers made from it. He never went to the award ceremonies. He just kept working. He expanded his barley acreage again, 150 acres. He started experimenting with other heirloom grains, rye, spelt. The dirt was enough. His grandfather had been gone for 10 years, but Thomas spoke to him every day, in the quiet of the malt house, in the rustle of the barley fields. He was no longer just a farmer. He was a maltster. He was the keeper of a story about a grain that wasn't fit for feed. And by 1987, that story was about to come full circle. It was about to walk up his driveway, wearing a face from the past. The sound of the truck was familiar, an old Chevy, rumbling up his lane. Thomas was outside, patching a fence. He watched it approach. He knew who it was before the truck even stopped. Frank Gable. He hadn't seen him in person in over a decade. He'd seen him in town, of course, from a distance, at the hardware store, the post office. They never spoke. Just a nod, if that. Now, here he was, getting out of his truck, in the middle of Thomas's farm. Frank looked older. The certainty in his shoulders had slumped a little. He walked over to Thomas. He looked around the farmstead, at the new malt house, the gleaming grain bins, the neat, well-kept yard. "You've done well for yourself, Tom." Thomas didn't say anything. He just waited. Frank cleared his throat. "Look, I'll get right to the point. I'm in a bit of a bind. There's a new brewery, a big one. They want to build a plant in the city. They're looking for a local malt supplier. It's a big contract, big enough to keep my mill going." Thomas continued to watch him. His face was impossible to read. "The brewery," Frank said, his voice dropping a little. "They have a specific request. They want to make their flagship beer with a local grain. They've been doing test batches, and they've settled on one they like." He paused. "They call it Miller's Gold." There it was, the words hanging in the air between them, between the boy who was told no and the man who had said it. "I need to buy your barley, Tom." Frank's voice was strained. "I need to buy all of it. I'll pay you top dollar, double the market rate, triple, whatever you want. I just need the grain." Thomas finally spoke. His voice was quiet, even. "You can't buy my barley, Frank." Frank looked confused. "I just told you, price is no object." "I don't sell barley," Thomas said. "I sell malt." The distinction was everything. It was the whole story, in 5 words. Frank stared at him. He didn't understand, or he didn't want to. "Tom, please. This is important. This contract could save my family's business, the business my father built." Thomas looked at the man. He saw the desperation in his eyes, the fear. He felt no pleasure in it, no sense of victory, just a deep, quiet sadness. For the 25 years that stood between them. He remembered standing in Frank's office, a boy of 21, terrified, hoping for a lifeline, and being offered an anchor instead. He remembered the kindness in Frank's voice, the certainty. That was the thing that had hurt the most. Not cruelty, but the absolute conviction of a good man who thought he knew best. "You were trying to protect me," he said to Frank. Frank looked relieved. "Yes, exactly, I was. I didn't want to see you lose your farm over one bad crop. I was trying to help you cut your losses." Thomas nodded slowly. "You were trying to protect me from losing a few $100s. He took a step closer. "But you almost protected me from my own life. You almost protected me from finding out what I was capable of. You almost protected me from everything that you see here today." He gestured to the farm, the malt house, the legacy. "There are some things more expensive than money, Frank." The room went silent then. Not a room, a farmyard. But it felt as quiet as that office 25 years ago. Frank Gable had no answer. There was nothing to say. He had built his life on being a man who knew things, who understood the numbers, who could look at a crop and see its future. And he had been wrong. So profoundly wrong, that his own survival now depended on the very thing he had declared worthless. He just stood there, a man undone by his own certainty. After a long moment, he turned. He walked back to his truck. He got in, and he drove away. Down the lane he had just driven up, past the fields of barley, miller's gold, growing strong and green under the afternoon sun. Proving someone wrong is one thing. Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind, that is the loneliest fight there is. Thomas never told anyone that story. Not his wife, not his children. It was a quiet thing, a private thing, a knowledge he carried inside him. He did not sell his malt to Frank Gable's mill. He sold it directly to the new brewery, at a fair price, on his own terms. The Gable Regional Mill closed its doors 2 years later, a victim of a changing world. A world that was starting to care more about stories than commodities. Thomas never felt happy about it, just sad that it had to be that way. His own business continued to grow, but it grew differently. In 1991, he helped his neighbors form a cooperative, the Miller Malting Cooperative. He taught other small farmers how to grow heirloom grains. He taught them how to malt their own crops, how to tell their own stories. He didn't want them to ever have to stand in a man's office and be told what their work was worth. He wanted them to decide for themselves. The co-op is still there today. It supports 30 different family farms, shipping specialty malts all over the world. In 2005, Thomas established the Elias Miller Agricultural Scholarship at the State University. It's not for the students with the best grades. It's for the students with the most audacious ideas, the ones who want to try the things the experts say are impossible, the ones who aren't afraid to fail. Thomas passed away in 2012. He was 71 years old. He died on the farm where he was born. His son runs the malt house now. His granddaughter is an agronomist, developing new varieties of heirloom grains. On the mantelpiece in the old farmhouse, there is a small glass jar. It's sealed with wax. Inside is a handful of dark golden barley corns, the original seeds, from a time before the hail, before the mill, before the doubt. Sometimes his son will pick up the jar. He'll hold it in his hands. He won't open it. He doesn't need to. He knows the story that's locked inside, the story of a bruised seed that the world had written off, a seed that just needed someone to believe in its heart, not just its skin. The most dangerous limitation is not the one imposed by a villain. It's the one imposed by someone who genuinely believes they are protecting you. Certainty about another person's capabilities, delivered with kindness, is more damaging than outright hostility, because you can't fight it with anger. You can't argue with it. It can only be disproven, with decades of quiet work, with a lonely, stubborn belief in yourself. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is being told no. They are being told to be practical, to cut their losses, to give up on the thing that only they can see the value in. They are being told this by a good person, a sensible person, a person who is certain they are right. This story is for them. It's a reminder that the world's certainty is often just a lack of imagination. It's a reminder that sometimes the most bruised and battered things have the strongest hearts. And a reminder of a simple truth, spoken by an old man at a kitchen table. The dirt is enough. The seeds are enough. You are enough. If this story means something to you, if you've ever felt the quiet weight of someone else's certainty, subscribe to this channel. There are more stories like this one that need to be told. Drop a comment and tell us about a time you chose to believe in your own story. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is standing at a crossroads. Someone who just needs to be reminded that they are enough.